So, what is spiritual? Is it is there a difference between regular, practical, everyday life and spirituality? And is there a difference between when we go into sort of, way more, how do I describe it? Like the immersion of just going into the heavy traumatic experiences of the world? Is that spiritual? And even when we're children and exploring and just coming out into the world with no particular agenda other than to discover, like, is that spiritual? And I would say everything is spiritual if your mind is attuned with what you're doing. So, and every experience has the opportunity to be spiritualized for sure. So, for instance, the times when you might do something like, taking drugs and, leaving your conscious, your usual conscious awareness, or, like maybe going into war and murdering other people, um, and yeah, there's a certain amount of sort of like dissociation where in doing these sort of activities, we're escaping our consciousness, we're escaping that presence. But there's, quite often with most of us, there's always, well, yeah, there is always that thread of connection to the spiritual realm. We are always, always, always connected. If we're in embodiment, we do have a connection, even if it's, even if we've rejected that connection, which, I haven't and you haven't too. But I'm talking like fallen beings, who've tried to sever that connection with their I am presence, with their God self. It's still there because they're still in incarnation, and it's just, it's all they're doing is denying this connection. um But yeah, I'm not here to so much focus on fallen beings. I'm sort of more considering, um, what is spiritual and what isn't spiritual. And because, in my life, I consider the life I led, I was always spiritually awake. I was always moving forwards, and every single choice I made was a part of my spiritual journey, a part of the divine plan. The thing is, I always thought, wow, I wonder what it would have been like if I'd sort of, gone into, spiritual training and sought out like a very typically spiritual path. Like, what would my life have been like? And look, I'm sure all paths would have taken me to where I needed to go. But the thing is, every single decision I made, even when it was sort of like, the wrong decision, it was like a bad decision, it was taking me forwards on the path. It was something I needed to go through in order to learn something about myself, to learn something about the world, to experiment with, roles to play, and to see, what impact those roles have on myself and on others. And it's basically, yeah, I think was building up, this big storehouse, a big catalogue of all kinds of experiences, and packing them into this one lifetime, because that was my divine plan. And I know there's a lot of other people out there who your divine plan is to pack in all of these experiences in order to see all the psychology attached with those experiences and to resolve it. So really, again, was it spiritual or was it unspiritual to choose, how do I put it? Like, just really full on extreme experiences, negative things, and, drugs, alcohol, perverted sex, wild partying, everything. I didn't murder people in this lifetime. So I guess I tried that in other lifetimes, no doubt. And, um, yeah, I know I didn't like it because I did shoot a gun once when I was a child. My father was doing some shooting and I asked him to teach me, and I was like, no, put it down, definitely not. So yeah, I can safely say that I obviously processed that experience well and truly. Um, so I would say that, everything can be spiritualized, and I can say with myself, a lot of the time, when I was making decisions that seemed like they were those wrong decisions, I was checking in with my higher self. Like, I was kind of like, should I do this? And then, this impulse would be like, yes, do it. And the impulse was partly, I'm sure it was partly my I am presence guiding me in there, but it was also my conscious you, which was like, my conscious you hadn't had enough of this particular outplay of relationships or whatever it might have been. And I needed to go in to just, draw out the trauma and the unresolved psychology in myself, to heal that and to bring myself to this point. So I would say that, everything is spiritual. And I really think there is no separation between, because if there's no time, between then and now. And also, the things that happened back then, like, I'm not that person, you're not that person, from 5 minutes ago, from 2 years ago, from 30 years ago. Like, we move on, we change, but our memories of what happened are there, and we have them to process and to learn from. And so, I look back at, really sort of, really turbulent experiences. And, at the time there was, the first lesson was being able to see, like, I no longer want any more of this, and I needed to bring in a particular, a certain sense of power in order to break free and walk away from it. And freedom, and to love myself, to learn, what it is to love myself. And, fast forward, 20 years on, and there's different nuances to those experiences that, I can also learn from now, which is more going into the nitty gritty of seeing the selves that were active there. Like, it might have been, a fairly codependent self, and, to break all of that free and to sort of see all the different nuts and bolts of that codependent self, and let each one die and just see the unreality of it. So, and also another aspect to that was, that when I think with myself there was a certain amount of learning to see, like, what happens when what I created, the negative experience that I had co-created, how that actually begins to break down. That there's, this second law of thermodynamics that comes into play. Like, if we create something that is not sustainable, according to the laws of abundance, then that creation, it will entropy, it will die, it will fall apart. And I remember I always used to sort of, go through sort of, the negative experience, dot, 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 and then all of a sudden, like, it would entropy, and it would have a big explosive ending, like almost like a big bang sort of ending. And eventually, I remember the very last time, sort of, it was at the beginning of what you call, the very, the focused healing journey, and this is about 15 years ago. And so, there was another experience where, it was, the big major entropy and an explosion at the end. And there finally came a point where, I felt that entropy happening, and I knew what the calling was. I was like, oh, it felt like a bomb sitting underneath me, like, oh, this is gonna, something's major's gonna happen. And I remember just sort of knowing, I just went in intuitively, and I just knew, like, oh, well, it's time to change things. Like, otherwise, there's going to be some sort of, big, the world I've created at this point, otherwise that's going to explode. And it was actually, I was living in a house at that point, and I knew, the journey was to become a gypsy and to move into a bus. Um, so, and so once and because I stopped and I listened within to, oh, it's time to sort of make a radical change. I knew exactly straight away what the answer was. It was kind of weird. Like, yeah, this bus was being worked on next door by a fellow, and I went round to him and said, how much for the bus? And he's like, yeah, he offered me a really great price, and I knew it was a done deal. And it was like, and because the whole idea is I knew I had to get out in the world and start, stop being so reclusive and start putting myself out in the world, and in order to challenge myself, but also to, develop myself and become more and to begin to express Christhood. So that's the story. It's the story of all life being spiritual. Everything can be spiritualized. We're never disconnected from our I am presence, from our spiritual awareness, from consciousness, and that we do have a choice on how our lives go. That, we can sort of um, we can create an abundant life without sort of subjecting ourselves to, when things just break down automatically on us, if we work in accordance with God's laws. Okay.